So Stassja, handing over to you now.
On Sunday, the 11th of September, we held a successful protest on Parliament steps in Melbourne. About 30 women showed up, and this was protesting the housing of male offenders in women's prisons. So I'm going to talk about what went on behind the scenes to get this event up and running, and a bit about a bit of a how-to guide for those who want to create a protest movement in your area. I'll be honest, I really looked to the amazing Anna McCormack, who runs IWD Brisbane Meanjin, as a model for how to run our protest. So first up, signage, very important to get your slogans right. Originally, I had ones that said, trans women are men. And while this is really obvious to all of us, it could come across as bigotry to those who don't know what's going on. So I consulted our little Facebook group for Melbourne protesters and also our wise radfem philosopher, Holly Lawford-Smith. And the response was to not even mention the word trans. So that took a bit of rejigging. I also wanted the signs to be reusable for future protests. So I covered numerous issues affecting women aside from prisons. I also covered sports, single-sex spaces, and lesbians don't like penis, and so on. And then I needed an anti-woke printer. As many will know, there is, this constant denial of service for women like us. But I'm friends with conservative gender-critical woman Moira Deeming, who's with the Liberal Party here in Victoria. And she put me in touch with her printer. And as a bonus, he was only a 10-minute drive from my home. So that was great. So my advice would be, if you run into any problems finding a printer, just call up your closest Liberal Party or One Nation MP and ask for a recommendation. Women were very generous, contributing money towards the signage costs. I got 30 core flute signs printed for $222. Core flute is the way to go. It's plastic, so it's waterproof, and it can't be ripped apart by counter protesters. On the day before the protest, I went to Bunnings with my dad, but I'm sure there's a lot of women who could do this without their dad. I spent $175 on these long, skinny bits of wood to turn them into handles. I was actually bowled over by how expensive that bit was, but anyway. My lovely dad hand sawed the bits of wood into suitable lengths, and then using a staple gun, we stapled the signs to the wooden handles. And we got through about 10 signs before Dad had the bright idea to test them. And he's whacked the back of the sign and it's just come straight off, staples and everything. So he started talking about quality control and we didn't want any counter protesters to be able to do that to our signs. So Dad had this fancy waterproof sealant glue kicking around, and we spent the next hour gluing and then stapling the signs to the wood. And this was tedious, but it's worth it because we now have really great signs for future protests. And interestingly, as we were working on the signs, we got to one that said, repeal self-ID, women don't consent. And my dad asks, what's self-ID? So that's probably going to be the response of most people in the general public. So if I could go back, I would change that and be more specific and say something about birth certificates or something like that. Anyway, so all up, total cost for the signs was $397. Next, I needed to find some women who were willing to give speeches at the event. So I had 3 women lined up. We got Jessica Williams, the founder of Single Sex Prisons WA, Jo Smith, who previously worked for Flat Out Inc., which is an organisation that works with women exiting the prison system and helping them to stay out of prison. And interestingly, they've since gone pro-trans and now advocate for trans and gender diverse, i.e. men. And I had a 3rd woman lined up. I'm not going to name her because she forgot that she was meant to be speaking and just had too much work on the day before to prepare any sort of speech. So I recommend checking in with your speakers 3 or 4 days prior, giving them a friendly reminder. Anna McCormack has an excellent portable sound system with a mic stand and an amplifier, and this is next on my wish list when I do a little fundraiser. But a simple substitute is to get a megaphone, and thankfully Angie had one from our previous ABC protest, and you can pick them up from Officeworks for about $45. So that's quite reasonable. We're also very lucky here in Victoria to have a secret TERF who put me in direct contact with the events department at Melbourne Police. So it's really worth contacting the police and notifying them of your protest just for your own safety. And we did see the cops drive past 2 or 3 times while we were there. Just Google it or call the relevant police station and fill out their forms. And especially if it's in the city, because, you know, there's all sorts in the city. We had a bunch of blokes who might have been day drinking, walk past and start yelling, "What do we want? VB," as in Victoria Bitter Beer. "When do we want it? Now." So, you know, anyway. But because our location was Parliament Steps, it also meant that there's always security at that building, which is really helpful. So suss all of that out regarding the location beforehand. Originally, we had picked the prior Saturday for our protest, but speaking with the police officer, she said not a chance because the freedom protesters take up Parliament Steps every Saturday. Now, they're the anti-lockdown protesters, and I reckon a lot of them would be on side, but just in terms of optics, we decided to move it. And just backing up a bit, while I was at Bunnings with Dad, I got this message from Angie saying that tributes to the Queen, because the Queen had just died, were going to be happening at Parliament Steps. And I just went into full panic mode. I was like, oh my God, we have to postpone. This is going to reflect really badly on our movement if we're there when everyone's mourning the Queen. And anyway, I got home, I rang the police events department. They didn't know anything about it. I Googled and messaged people on Facebook, and I ended up working out that they had actually moved the tributes to the Queen to Government House, not Parliament Steps. So, phew, that was a big relief. The day before the event, I realised I hadn't booked a venue from the after party, for the after party, which is very important. So I asked Jasmine Sussex to do that for me. Thank you, Jasmine. She picked a great venue. Just across the road from Parliament House, and it's got all these rooms like we were in the cabinet room, so it has this Parliament theme to it, and I can just imagine all the politicians going there after a sitting and having a few drinks. but it is really important because it gives women a chance to get to know each other and build relationships, and it just strengthens the solidarity and the likelihood of them coming to the next protest. So I really recommend organising an after party event. I also hadn't organised anyone to record the speeches, but I found out today that Angie recorded them. So I'll have to have a look and maybe share them. And we're also really lucky to have a fantastic professional photographer among our ranks here in Melbourne. So if you saw the photos, that's why they looked so good. She did an amazing job. Thank you, Natalie. And another last minute thing was preparing the chants. So you've got to have good chants, and if they rhyme, that's even better. So I again asked Anna McCormack if she had any, and I modified them a bit for our specific protest against the prison situation. And then I drove into the city with Angie and Jasmine, and on the way, Jasmine came up with a really good one in the car as well. So team effort. One thing I didn't do that I wish I had done was get some pamphlets printed, because we definitely piqued some passers-by, but we didn't have any information to give them. So if you have a sympathetic member of parliament, they will probably let you use their photocopier for free. And I got that tip from Isla McGregor in Hobart, because I know she's taken advantage of that in the past. Politicians are meant to, provide that service to community groups. So try that avenue if you don't want to pay. So the order of events was me nervously introducing the protest, then introducing each speaker, then opening up the mic for anyone who wanted to say a few words. Then we did the chants, and then we did the after party. We didn't do a march, and largely because of the location of Parliament House here in Melbourne. Yeah, but it's something to consider if you want to include a march. I'll finish there and hand it over to Angie.
Why did we protest about prisons? Well, we were contacted by a woman on Twitter. I was contacted on Twitter by a woman who had seen our YouTube channel and had seen our episode on prisons. And she was someone who worked in prisons, and she had been told by inmates that a woman had been sexually assaulted by a trans-identifying male in Tarrangower prison. We had that information, and Stassja and I tried to get journalists interested in publishing on that issue because it's horrific. And they were so late to the party. We knew about it months before, and the only time it was mentioned was months later on the bottom of an article about how much transgender people suffer in prison. There was a tiny little byline that said, oh, by the way, a woman was assaulted. So we were furious about that. Then we found out that a rapist, an attempted rapist, and a child sexual abuser was being sent to a female prison. Their name was Lisa Jones, and they sexually assaulted a child in Germany, and they were deported. And within 12 months of them arriving back in Melbourne, they grabbed a woman on the streets in Richmond and attempted to rape her. The only reason that he didn't succeed is because passers-by pulled him off. That was in the media, and it was a horrific attack. It was reported as a female attempting to rape a female. So we were completely livid about that too. So we decided on prisons. That was the reason, because it's a horrific, horrible, disgusting thing that men are being sent to female prisons, that the public do not know about it. And they would be horrified. They'd be absolutely horrified. So that was the main reason. And to give the women a voice too. The women at the prison, which is Phyllis Frost, were so terrified of Lisa Jones that they made a petition as prisoners. Now, anyone who knows anything about prison, that puts those women at risk. Anytime women, get together and make a complaint about something to do with the prison, they risk, not getting parole, they risk not getting privileges. So they were so terrified, they decided to do that. So yeah, we wanted to give them a voice. And also the other reason was because it's, anyone who comes up to oppose that, anyone who said, oh, you're bigots, why are you protesting on Parliament steps about this issue? They're going to look horrendous, because nobody in their right mind would oppose a group of women advocating for other women to be safe. So, it was also about, how that would be perceived, because as we know, there's a lot of hostility to anybody that calls out anything to do with transgenderism. So, yeah, we thought that the prisons was an issue that people would feel very, very strongly about. And we were relatively safe from being abused because it's an awful, awful situation. So, we protested at Parliament House because it was relevant to the issue, for politicians, journalists and the like, to get the message that someone actually notices these women and somebody cares about the impact of self-ID on women. And also where we protested was on a public thoroughfare. So we were able to, inform passers-by of what was actually happening. And, some were shocked. They didn't know. We had trams going in both directions through the whole time. And the general look on people's faces were they're looking, and as they read the signs, their looks of shock, like they'd actually, maybe it could have been the issue, but the other thing was that they had actually seen TERFs in real life. Because, people know that women are speaking out about the transgender issue, but we're kind of these, hypothetical women on social media, usually with avatars. We're not actual women. And it's really important to show an in real life presence, and that women are so concerned about these issues that they're getting up off their couches, risking, being abused for being bigots, and standing in the streets with great big signs holding placards. And it's important that we get seen to be doing things like that. One, so other women who are having, strange thoughts about this issue feel emboldened enough to speak up themselves. To send a message to people and to inform the public of what's actually going on, because we have been completely no-platformed by the media. Imagine us trying to take an issue as serious as, women being at risk of sexual assault in a prison and nobody wanting to touch it. That's how bad it is here in Australia. And, people are saying, oh, yeah, but, we can do other things. Trolling on social media isn't having the desired effect of getting people to pay attention to these issues. We need to break through the actual media and get them to pay attention. And, this is one of our many strategies for doing that. Our YouTube channel is another strategy. The things Kit's going to talk about is another strategy. So we have to have, as activists, we have to have a multi-pronged approach, and real life action is a really important part of that. Stassja talked about the risk management. Yeah, the police, very important to let them know, to have a permit, because then you are entitled to that space, and anyone who counter protests you will be removed by the police because you've got your permit, you're allowed to be there. It's a human right to speak, and if you've got your permit, they can't remove you. We all commit to staying together as a group for safety, and also to give people who aren't very confident in this sort of situation more confidence, because they're there with their friends. And I've personally witnessed women who've never been to a protest before coming out of their shells as the as they sort of get adrenalized, and yeah, it's really interesting to watch. And you know, some women are very concerned about their anonymity, and fortunately we live in a time where it's normal to wear a face mask. So a pair of sunnies and a face mask, nobody can recognize you. And also, you know, we've had women attend wearing wigs and hats and sunnies and face masks because they've been uncomfortable. And yeah, that's a good thing for people to do if they're concerned about being identified, because we all know that we risk things about, you know, every time we turn up to something like this, we're risking getting doxxed or whatever. But what I've found personally is that trans activists are more interested in having a figure person to throw abuse at. And as Stassja and myself are known, and so are some women around Melbourne, you know, they're not busy doxing people that are with us. They've got someone to hurl abuse at because they know who we are. Yeah, I think even more than the protest itself, as Stassja mentioned, is the after part, and where you get to know the other women, because, you know, it's a difficult thing to be an activist, and particularly on this issue where women feel exhausted, they feel invisible, they feel like nobody cares. We're talking about serious issues like safeguarding. We're talking about children. It is an emotionally taxing issue. And when you are there with women who have the same concerns that you do, it is really, really healing, soothing, and empowering. You know, some people are nervous about turning up in real life, but a couple of years ago, I was at a protest, and it was actually, we were counter-protesting at an International Women's Day march. And it turned out that 7 women ended off, kettled by the march organisers, surrounded by rampant trans activists screaming trans women are women at us, with the police behind us. And the age range of those women, the youngest was 19 and the eldest was in her late 70s. And those 7 women were all completely safe because we took, you know, the advice that I sort of gave out, that we're giving today about how to stay safe. So yeah, I thoroughly recommend getting out in person because one, to meet other protesters, but also because we need to get out and be seen, because it's the other ways aren't working. I love protesting. I grew up, my dad was a unionist. I was in the student union. I actually ran for women's officer, and I was a terrible one because I only ran it because I wanted free alcohol, and I got a crash course in radical feminism. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. So I'm really glad I got involved in politics. I have protested about the environment, animal rights, anti-fascism. And what I have found about in real life protesting, I'm a woman from the left, and I think it has an impact on the left when they see other leftist women out there telling the truth. We just what I mentioned before about that group of women that turn up every year to the International Women's Day march, which has now been overtaken, that's ran by the unions, and it is a sea of men, and they chant trans slogans. That we have managed to unsettle them so much that the union is thinking of not running the march next year, and that we're talking a handful of women. Last year there was about 26 of us. The year before there ended up being 7 or 8. The year before that there was only 6 women, and we have had a huge impact on that. So, you know, when you do show up, it has an impact. We really, really need numbers. We're planning another protest, and the next issue we're going to talk about is childhood medical transition, because once again, that is an issue that the public knows very little about, and it is a terrible, terrible issue and if somebody comes along and says to us, you know, we've got no right to protest against that, then they've got rocks in their head. So the optics of that are very good. One of the other things that I've managed to do is I actually only started my Twitter account because I went to one of those protests, and the other side were telling lies about what actually happened. So I published some pictures from the event on my Twitter. And what happened was that those pictures went viral. So it's not just about how many women turn up on the day. It's also about the optics you can create from the photos that are taken on the day. An example of the success of that was some friends of ours did a 2-person protest outside the prison a couple of weeks ago with signs in their car and parked it in the car park. But because they put it on social media, that had thousands and thousands and thousands of shares. And that's another reason why we had to do the in real life stuff, because it inspires other people to get up off their seat. Not all of us are good at writing letters. I'm terrible at it. There's other parts of activism that I'm appalling at. Public speaking is one of them. But something I'm really, really enjoy and I'm really good at is getting a placard or hanging a banner from a bridge or tying myself to a tree or confronting a room full of rabid trans activists. I actually enjoy it. I enjoy the adrenaline of that. And that's my strength. And that's why I'm so passionate about getting other women out there. But everyone has different skills that they can bring. You know, if someone wants to come, but they don't want to stand with the group, they can stand across the road and take photos, or they can stand in the background and take security, be security, and, keep in touch via phone with the people who are actually protesting. So there's a role for everybody. Yeah, so I thoroughly encourage people to either attend a protest or even have a protest, have your own protest. And the more the merrier. So yeah, thank you.